Sean Conway, welcome to the
Good.
Build Your Purpose podcast.
I love it, Tom. How's it going, mate?
It's going very well. Thank you so much for coming on because we spoke about just before we came on about how busy you must be. So I really do appreciate you taking the time.
No, anytime. Look, I'm a yes guy, so when people say, "Oh yeah, come on," if I can reach one or two people with something that makes them do something that they wouldn't have done, then yeah, it's worth it for me. So yeah,
Awesome.
thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, the pleasure is all mine. And it's a conversation that I've had personally wanted to have for a long time. And we're going to start it the same way I start all conversations on Build Your Purpose, with the intention of finding out what it is that drives you, what makes you tick, what motivates you. And that's by asking you, Sean Conway, what is your purpose?
It's varied over time, I guess. I think now I just have to chase things, and I think my purpose is simply to lead as an example for my kids, mostly, and anyone else who was potentially stuck in a rut like I was 15 years ago. And yeah, so I guess the thing that I get the most reward for is when someone sends me an email and they said, "Oh, I heard you speak, listen to a podcast or read one of your books, and because of that, I went and did X, Y, Z." And the best example of that I had only like a couple of months ago. A guy called Thomas sent me a picture of him as an 18-year-old. He's just cycled Land's End to John O'Groats, solo and unsupported, by himself, 18 years old. I was like, that is
Love it.
amazing. And in that email was a selfie with me and him 10 years ago when he was 8. And I'm like, that is cool. Like, that for me, I get goosebumps now thinking about it. Like, that made it totally worth it. Just that one email. So, that is the bit that tickles, my ego, I guess, and makes it sort of worth all the pain and the misery and the suffering. Um, but then, it's now a little bit more personal with my two boys. I got two young kids, and you know what? I really, I can't wait for them to do their first Ironman. And they come home and they're broken, and they're like, "Oh my god, that was the hardest thing I've ever done." And I'm there sitting in my chair going, "What? Only one?" Yeah, I'm going to be the most annoying dad in the world when they're teenagers.
It's a hell of a
Yeah.
legacy to live up to, you've got, yeah, for sure.
Well, I've got to be careful of that, of course. I'm not expecting or wanting anyone to pretty much do anything I've done. I'm sort of what I feel like, you watch Formula One, Mercedes and Ferrari, they have these like really high extreme, no one's going out and buying one of those, right? And that's how I feel. And I really like that. I want to be that sort of, this is the pinnacle, this is the top of what you can push yourself to, but I'm not expecting anyone to actually do it. If they want to, that is great. Like, please come and email me. I will help you break one of my records. In fact, a bunch of my records have already been broken, which I really get a kick out of, that I've got someone else to go and do that as well. But there's still a couple I haven't. So, for example, I'm still the only person to have done a swim, bike, run, Land's End, John O'Groats. No one's done it. No one else, which is surprising. Which means the female
Well,
record's still up for grabs, everyone. Come on. Like, I've been trying to get someone to do that. Jasmine Harrison's the only person who's done the swim. Female who's done the swim. And I'm like, you've done the hard one. Just do the cycle and the run. So anyway, I'll keep banging that drum until
I
someone
mean,
kind of joins the club.
yeah, I mean, personally, it doesn't surprise me too much that someone hasn't gone and done it yet because it's a hell of a feat. On the research for the pod, some of the challenges you've taken on, the scale of them, the duration of them as well are epic. But I'd love to dive back to the beginning of what you said there, that 15 years ago or so you were in a bit of a rut, and what came out of that 15 years later is now the man you are today with all of these achievements that we spoke about. But I wonder if you could go into a little bit of detail around that rut, because the pod for me was basically a tool. I created it as a tool for something that I would have wanted 10 years ago when I left school and didn't really have a purpose, didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't know what opportunities were out there. And I created this as a resource for what I would have wanted back in the day, to speak to people like yourself that have basically gone gone and achieved their purpose and gone and done these incredible things. I wonder if you could speak to a little bit about that process of going from being in a rut to then getting yourself out, getting moving and going and doing anything, but equally then to the level that you've taken it to.
Well, there's a lot to unpick there and advise on, I guess. Firstly, I'll go back a little bit. I think in my, well, I know now, in my 20s, I was too much in a rush to make a success of myself too early on. And then because those results for the slightly difficult thing I was trying to achieve, which for me at the time was becoming a National Geographic photographer. That was the goal. And when it didn't come quick enough, what I started doing is I basically started lowering my ambition to increase my chance of making a success of myself. For me was I was a photographer and I wanted to be a working photographer and I wanted to earn decent money, but I wasn't really money motivated. But I needed to earn money to pay bills, and I knew that the self-employed sort of entrepreneur life was for me. I have been employed. I used to work for Snappy Snaps, and I worked in a cabbage factory to cut cabbages and lettuces and all that. And I used to be a lecturer in photography, so it just wasn't for me. Like, I'm very self-driven, and I like to be totally responsible for my own thing. And even now, I employ a couple of people in my businesses, but I try and keep it just all under my own steam, which is the way I like it. Of course, I have room for growth and that sort of thing, and I'll get other people on board. But I really like to be the master of my own ship, right? So when I didn't get those big, scary, ambitious photography jobs like, the big National Geographic gigs, the travel gigs, the magazine gigs, yeah, as I said, I started lowering my ambition just so that I could succeed at something, just to feel good. Like, oh, okay. So I lowered it to something else, which was easier or more, there's more jobs of that, like corporate photography. And then because my heart wasn't in it, so I didn't really achieve that either. So I lowered my ambition again and did something easier and easier and easier. And then eventually, after like 5 or 6 years, I was probably like 25. I was doing 90% of the work I was doing was school portraits. So I became a school portrait photographer, which is nothing against school portrait photography. It just wasn't my goal and dream. It made me good money. I set up a business with a friend of mine, James. We had 7 staff. We had an office. So that it sort of looked like success, I guess, on the outside. Like, oh, we have staff, we have officers, we had photographing, we have lots of contracts with lots of nursery schools all around the country. But it wasn't the dream. Like, it wasn't what I set out to do, and I'd basically just lowered that ambition bar so low that it wasn't exciting anymore. I was like, I could photograph 10,000 kids a year against a white background and sell the pictures to the parents. Like, it's the easiest gig in the world, really, but it wasn't ambitious. It was just like, I basically was a posh passport photographer, really. And so that was the first thing. I guess I was in too much of a rush to get successful, didn't spend enough time building the baseline. We all overestimate what we can achieve in a year, but underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years. And I lowered my ambition to increase my chance of succeeding at something. And that combination meant I went through all my 20s just chasing the wrong ball, and not playing the long game, basically. And then I turned 30 and I was like, this is not cool. And actually, if you look behind me, where is it on the wall? Oh no, I've taken it down. Oh, it's just off frame there. But I did the cheese. Basically, the breaking point for me is I did the Gloucestershire cheese rolling.
I saw that in the research.
Yeah, but a year or two before my 30th birthday, and that was sort of a realization of like, what am I doing? And then in the Hollywood version of my story, I do the cheese rolling, bang my head, have this epiphany, walk into my office that Monday and sell my business for £1. The reality is that took about 18 months to sort of wind down, really decide that I really want to just throw in the towel. I had no savings. As a 20-year-old, you just sort of, I just landed up every time I sort of started making a bit more money, I just bought more expensive versions of the stuff I had already. It was stupid. Like, like a slightly more expensive TV, a slightly more expensive car. Like, they both do the same job. A slightly posher wine at Waitrose, eating out a couple of nights more. Like, my life really didn't change dramatically. And I just spent it stupidly. So, again, my own fault. So I was in this rut, and I thought, right, well, let me just start from scratch again. Like, let me just clean slate. What does a clean slate look like as a 30-year-old with no A-levels, no university, nothing? I was like, okay, well, what was the goal, Sean? I was like, well, I wanted to actually go travel around the world as a photographer. I'd fallen out of love with photography, so that was probably not going to be my thing anymore. So I thought, well, what else? Like, I was literally just thinking outside the box. Like, I want to go traveling, can't afford to go traveling because basically I didn't have any savings. I've seen guys like row the Atlantic and climb Everest, and they seem to have like brands on them, like sponsors, logos and stuff. And I'm like, how? Like, what's happening? Like, what's this model like? What is this model? And then I was like, whoa, this is like a totally legit thing. And in Britain, it's been going on for hundreds of years. You go back to Shackleton. Shackleton's potentially dying, after his failed expedition, and he's not writing letters to his family. He's writing letters to his sponsors, going like, "I'm really sorry, this has not worked out. When you find us, you can have the piano, and you can have this, and you can keep the whatever." And I was like, well, that's a thing, basically. You think of some daft thing to do that maybe has some sort of world record attached to it, or a first, or something. And then you find companies and brands who want to back your idea. And Britain's amazing for that. Like, the companies, like, we live on a tiny island, really, in the grand scheme of things. So the idea to explore the world is sort of ingrained in everyone, and brands will get behind that, and it's brilliant. And I was like, well, this is great. This does what photography was going to do. So I was like, well, I just need to think of a record now. And then it just so happened that Vin Cox, a previous round the world cycle record holder, was putting on the first, what he called the global bike race. So it was basically a cycle race around the world, following all the Guinness guidelines and everything. And that was it. I was like, oh, I'll enter that. Because there was a couple of other athletes who had entered already, and they seemed to have sponsors already. So I was like, okay, well, this could be cool. Yeah, and that basically was the start of this long, miserable road I've been pedaling for the last 15 years, pretty much.
Yeah. It's an amazing story, like how you went from that moment of realization, and obviously at that point you would have had, as you say, everyone's got responsibilities, whether it's financial or family or even just themselves. Particularly when you get to 30, where a lot of people around you are mortgaged up, wives, kids, etc. To have that moment of going, I'm going to go and reinvent who I am and what I want to be doing with my life, and then not only to go and do it by going and starting a different business, you went and did it by cycling around the world and taking on these huge challenges. Where do you think the confidence or personality trait within you comes from to not only take it and reinvent it, but to take it to the extreme that you went and did?
Okay, again, a couple of things. One thing I would caveat is I didn't actually, because what I don't want to be is I don't want to be this flag bearer of like, if you're not enjoying life, just quit everything and start again. I don't think that works for a lot of people. And in fact, a friend of mine did that exact same thing. So he had quite a good, well-paid job, and he was like, he hated it, and he's like, right, I'm gonna quit my job and cycle around the world. I was like, brilliant. Okay, cool. Why are you gonna cycle around? I don't know. How long? I don't know. Like, he had no goal, no purpose within that cycling around the world idea. Quit his job, had some like investments and things so he could live off of pretty frugal monthly living, and which could have rolled him out forever basically. And he only lasted 6 months. He's like, oh no, wasn't for me. I needed more purpose, and I needed something to chase potentially, because some people do. I'm one of them. And he bailed. He's back home, back looking for work. It's like, he's probably it was a couple of years ago now. So yeah, look, I'm definitely not that guy. And I also had no responsibility. So it was quite a easy choice for me. I had no mortgage, I had no kids, no wife, no partner, nothing. I could literally just be like, right, I can start afresh. And also, I was sort of at the bottom of the barrel anyway, other than having a steady income. Like, that bit was okay, but it wasn't groundbreaking. It wasn't like I was on hundreds of grand a year or anything, right? I was still living in a flat share in London, with, flatmates. London's expensive. For me, it was quite an easy sort of like break and just start again. There was sort of I always had the fallback of like moving back in with my mum in a one-bed council house, which I did actually land up doing after I cycled around the world. But that's another story. So I was never going to not have a roof over my head. I was always going to be able to, have some skills that I could put enough food on the table. And I had sort of, but then I didn't really even think about it. I sort of didn't have a plan B. And that was, I think, for me, important. When there's no plan B, the necessity is the mother of all invention, right? So when there's no plan B, you don't have that easier option to potentially take. Because
I think it's such an interesting point, because you hear a lot. I think like Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker, business coach from America, says one of his phrases, I think, is burn the boats. So quickest way to take the island is to burn the boats, i.e. don't give yourself an exit plan. And then Mel Robbins, another one, says go and take massive risks, go and take the biggest risks of your life. And you think that's fantastic, but there's always that what if. And as you spoke about there, you had that safety net around you. You committed massively to the plan, but there was always that potential safety net, which I think is such an important point, because people who maybe listen to the podcast might be having similar thoughts to what you had 15 years ago, which is, I'm not that inspired by my job. However, I do have responsibilities of wife, husband, children, mortgage, insurances, whatever, all those vicarious things we have in our life that cause us probably the most stress in our life, are the most unimportant things, ultimately. But what advice would you give to someone who maybe is in that sort of similar headspace of someone who goes, I'm not inspired really by what I'm doing. However, I'm not able to reinvent the wheel completely. But how can they build more challenge into their life? How can they build more purpose into their life from your experience when they've got those responsibilities as well?
Yeah, I've sort of conflicting ideas on this constantly, because everyone's different. I don't think it's good for people to expect their job to be this amazing thing the whole time that you're super, motivated to do. I don't think we should put that pressure on ourselves for our job to be that thing, because I think there's other stuff we can do outside of work that gives us that fulfillment and things. Yes, if there's a particular job that really is making you mega down, and your colleagues are not great, and whatever you're working for is not something you're passionate about, you need to start thinking about an exit. A clean exit's not always, I think, ideal for people. As I said, I think there's a way you can have a conversation with whoever you're working for to reduce your hours potentially. You almost certainly can live on less money than you think you can. Like, that is for sure. So yeah, I would keep your job, find out a way you could potentially reduce your hours, to then start slowly working on something else you enjoy. So I'm mentoring someone in that exact situation at the moment. So he's in a particular job that is very well paid. So and he doesn't hate it. He just can't see himself doing it for the next 20 years. So I said, well, why don't you, what's your passion? And we've written a business plan and a plan on how to do that. And then I'll pull it off my wall here. I told him to write, and I think this is very important that everyone should have, this is my week divided into hours. So 5 a.m. till 8 p.m., 9 p.m. even, every night. And every hour in my week's accounted for, with a couple of gaps for potentially where I've got to do the school run and things like that. So when I got him to do that, he suddenly was like, "Man, I actually have I have like, 8 hours a week of where I'm normally just sitting on my phone, or doing something pointless." Well, you can start working on your thing, because you got to remember, okay, and this is impractical, but actually with everyone working from home now, it's the numbers are more in your favor now. 24 hours a day, right? 8 hours work, 8 hours sleep, 8 hours play. Okay, that's very unrealistic for everyone. But however, it does make you think a little bit differently, doesn't it? And if everyone's working from home 9 till 5, you've got, and of course you've got the school run, and you've got to do the cooking and the cleaning and the ironing and the hoovering and the gardening and the mowing the lawn, all that stuff, right? However, you can, if you do this thing where you divide your week into every hour and account for it, I promise you'll find out, you'll realize how much more time you actually have, and start doing the thing that maybe you're passionate about. Because again, there's so many nuances to this, but the other problem with making your passion your job is you can ruin the passion. Like, that is also a legit thing. Like, sometimes your passion should just stay your passion. If you love, you love just getting on your bike and going for a ride on the weekend, and that's your favorite thing, having to make that your job could ruin it. Because suddenly you're now like, right, how do I make money as a cyclist and I'm not pro? Right, well, I've got to be an influencer. I've got to get brand deals. I've got to potentially do some sort of record. I then got to write a book about it. I then got to potentially get on the speaking circuit all about the bike ride I did. Now I'm getting brand deals, and I'm getting offered kit that I don't really like potentially, but I need the money. And like the whole dynamic changes to you just going like, I want to ride my bike. And it's the same for everything. Like, I'm into knife making. And I make pretty decent knives, like the metal work, the woodwork, all that sort of thing. And a few of my mates are like, oh, you should totally sell these. And I'm like, I could not think of anything worse. Like, I do not want orders backing up and having to make this sort of little skinning knife or whatever, peeling knife. I'd rather just have it as a fun thing for me, right? So, yeah, it's and that's why keeping your job and just testing the waters, I think, is super important for a lot of people.
Yeah, fantastic, like practical advice to break your week down into hour by hour, and everything's accounted for. And I think, as you say there, then you do find gaps, and you do find time to be able to go and pursue your purpose. And what a lot of people, myself included, have turned towards, I think, increasingly these days, is training in some form or another. You have your job 8 hours a day, and your escape is now, as you say, getting on the bike, getting in the pool, going for a run, training in some form or another. And I think there's probably no one better to speak to the importance of physical health that then feeds mental health and then overall kind of purpose in life than yourself. Because we were joking before we came on, and I wasn't going to say it, but I'm going to say it, is that I did a 70.3 last year with my fiance. We loved it. It was brilliant. I'm now realizing I've done a half Ironman to a man that has done, I did 105 full distance Ironman triathlons in 105 days. And for anyone listening who maybe has heard the term Ironman, but isn't fully aware of what it is, even though I'm sitting here talking to you, it's unfathomable to me that you did that many for that long over that time period as well. What was the driving force behind taking on that challenge? Because that's not just a physical challenge, that's a whole lifestyle for a decent chunk of time in terms of training, but then 105 days in a row going out and swimming, cycling and running as far as you did. What was the driving force behind that? And in the first instance, to say 105, let's go.
So it was the fourth of the Grand Slam records that I didn't have. So there's 4 types of records in the world of endurance. You can get a world's first, furthest or longest, fastest, and the most of. There's 4 types. It was the one I didn't have. I was the first to swim the length of Britain. I had the world's longest triathlon record at one point. I was the fastest to cycle across Europe unsupported. And yeah, the most is I just didn't have it. So, and I knew the most was always going to be a triathlon-based thing. So I could have done the most sprints, the most Olympics, the most halves, or the most fulls. Obviously, for me, it had to be the most fulls. And I did sort of flirt with the idea back in 2018, but I was too young. I was 37. I knew I needed a bit more time in the legs. I needed a bit more experience. And then so I just waited my time, and then that was sort of the why. I just needed to get that fourth record, which I'd spent 10 years getting the three Fs, the first, furthest, and fastest. So I needed the most of. And then that was why. I mean, I just was hungry to chase this long thing. Obviously, by now I've had over 10 years of experience in this game, which you needed. I needed that experience to be able to put all the systems in place in order to achieve that, because it's not an averaging record, it's an actual one. So you've got to do an actual one a day. You're not averaging one over the 105 days. So that was hard. That was definitely the hardest thing I've done by a mile. Second to swimming the length of Britain, but just the pain, just constant. There was just no off time. I get home, I eat, I fall straight in bed. I wake up, I swim, bike, run, get home, fall into bed. Like there was, there may have been 1 or 2 days when I was slightly quicker and I wanted to have a bit of time with the kids. But mostly it was just you're on that edge. You're at that level of high performance without burnout. Like you don't want to drop off the cliff, right? So you've got to sustain that right on the edge. You're hitting that, just going up to that red line all the time. Because if you fall off the cliff, it's hard to climb back up. Or if you don't push it close enough to the red line, you just slip down the back of the wave, right? So that was sort of the reason that one came about, to be honest.
So I mean, it's unbelievable. Like I said, I'm standing here talking to you, and I still can't fully get my head around how one person could do that. And you say it's the hardest thing you've done, and you've done some pretty hard things. On day, let's say 75, and you're really in the thick of it, and you say that you're really balancing. You're precariously close to the edge of burnout, physically, mentally. What were the tactics that you used to keep yourself healthy when you're putting yourself under that much strain and stress?
Yeah, health is actually one of the pillars. So I talk about the 10.5 pillars of endurance. Like if you have a challenge you want to complete, mostly you're looking at ultra distance upwards, an Ironman, and then anything that's multi-day. So anything that you're looking at 10 hours-ish or more, these become super important. They're sort of important for like marathons and stuff, but you can wing a marathon and still finish. So you've got these 10.5 pillars, and they are planning, experience, equipment, fitness and conditioning, nutrition and hydration, sleep and recovery, muscle management, health, as you said, mindset, community, and then the 0.5 is luck. You need a bit of luck sometimes. So staying healthy was one of the protocols. So, I'm no handshakes, trying to stay away from people, eating all my macros and micros nutritionally wise, because when you do exercise you're mostly just having carbs pretty much. You sort of forget that in the nutritional pie you got energy, recovery, and health. You got to nail that as well. So from a health perspective, I just had a health protocol. Eat everything I needed to eat to stay healthy, stay away from germs. I took some risks in that side with my kids, hanging out with my kids, hoping they didn't pick up something at school, but I decided that was a worthwhile risk. I'd rather have a bit of. I got good energy hanging around with them in the evening, so it was a calculated risk, and I would just, if I got ill, I was going to have to just deal with it. It was worth it rather than like being in really like kids don't come near me for 4 months. That was that was
completely
a non-negotiable.
isolated.
So
of the so you were speaking there about how how the pillars of performance, pillars of endurance performance. Of the people that we spoke about there who maybe want to go and pursue a challenge and a purpose alongside obviously their day job, and a lot of those people do turn to triathlons, Ironmans, half Ironmans, backyard ultras, etc. Which of those pillars do you think people fall down on most? On average, because there's those pillars there, and people are either sitting at their desk or they're interacting with people or their diet. Or of those sort of 10, which do you find are the most common problem areas for people, do you think?
So firstly, I really think people put too much effort and energy into their fitness and conditioning. And I think they just think, if I can get fit and conditioned enough, I'm going to smash it. Yes, you've got to be a certain level of fitness and conditioning. However, that that doesn't mean you can be the fittest person in the world. If you don't eat or drink properly on an Ironman, you're toast. Like, it's just not going to happen. Or you can do the correct training program, for 6 months leading up to a race. But if you're not sleeping well, if you're not recovering well, if you're not dealing with your muscle management correctly, those are two pillars, you're just going to get injured, right? Or if you have the wrong equipment, you definitely don't need the best equipment in the world, but the wrong equipment. But back to your question, I think people are mostly kind of confused by nutrition and hydration. I think people really need to understand. I mean, we all eat. Every human eats 3 times a day, or like, it's the thing we almost do the most of in life is eat and put stuff into our body to fuel us. Like, you might as well kind of get good at that, And it's a skill. Once you've learned it, you've learned it. Like, just everyone should just be learning about nutrition and hydration and what's your sweat rate, what's your salt loss, what's good food, what's bad food for you. Everyone should get blood tests on what they can metabolize. There's a thing called a methylation test, which is DNA based. You can do it on the day you're born. It'll tell you what your body can actually break down. So all these things, I think should be a super high priority. So people definitely don't focus enough on that. I think also people don't do enough mindset work for when things get a bit tough. I think people want the results, but somehow get a little bit kind of confused or anxious about the process. And especially, I coach a whole bunch of athletes for Ironman, and it's super overwhelming at the beginning. But I just think about it, like, if you're signing up for an Ironman, it's a bit like when you first started to learn how to drive a car, right? Do you remember you get in that car and you're like, oh, mirrors, indicator, brake, pedal, clutch, yeah. Mirrors, it's too much. You just do one thing at a time. And that's why I set out the pillars. Like, the first one, planning. Like, go into planning, look at everything. Look at the temperature, the road conditions, what's if for an Ironman, for example, what's the sea swim going to be like? Where you're going to stay, how far out you're going to stay, what's the start time, what time you're going to have to get up that morning beforehand, are you flying, do you want to book stuff now so it doesn't get too expensive, all that. And that gets you excited by it. And then you look at experience and you think, right, well, when you start a journey and you don't have much experience, your success or failure is entirely down to luck. So you always start with 2 jars. Your experience jar is empty and your luck jar is full. And if you win at something or you do well, it's mostly down to luck because you have no experience. The goal is to move all the coins from the luck jar to the experience jar, so that eventually when you do achieve it, it's all down to experience. You're not relying on any luck at the end, right? And I think a lot of people underestimate how much experience they have in a lot of stuff anyway. You just start thinking about, like, oh, okay, what? And then you look at all the other things, like, do I know how to fix a puncture on my bike? Well, actually, I do. Okay, well, I have some experience in that. Maybe I could get quicker. Okay, we'll do that. And then you start working on the physical stuff like fitness and conditioning, and then fuel and hydration, sleep and recovery. So you just follow that path and just sort of work out and be inquisitive about that sort of thing. However, that said, I think at the beginning, you should just do it for fun. I don't think you should think, genuinely, although I live by the 10.5 pillars, it's the only reason I've broken all my records. I don't think you need to implement that as a day one strategy. Think day one, week one, month one, just go and do the thing for fun. Don't even wear a watch. Just go for a run. See how you feel. Eat well, and then, recover well. Start being curious, but do it for a laugh. And I always say, like, what would this look like if it was more fun? Ask yourself that question. Every time you go and do something, say, right, I want to achieve the same goal, which is I want to run for an hour. Now, what would this look like? What would running for an hour look like if it was more fun? And that's up to you. I remember when I ran the length of Britain, I was running down a lot of the canals. And I'm like, canals are boring. Like, they just look the same. There's no hills. It's flat. So I was like, I'm gonna chase ducks. So whenever there was a duck on the path, I'd have this game where I could see if I ran too fast, they'd fly away. And then so I'd see how sort of long I could run next to a duck with it waddling in the water before it flew away. I did the same thing when I cycled around the world, actually. I called it chasing dogs back then. Dogs would often like run and chase me on the bike. So I had this game of like, how far could I get the dog to run after me? If I went too fast, it would give up. If I went too slow, it would bite me. So I'm like, okay, look, I mean, those are a bit silly and a little out there, but you can find the fun in the beginning and just make it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first thing is just start doing the thing. Be realistic with your time frames of your fitness level. You know, people can only increase their fitness at a certain rate. You can increase that rate with good recovery, sleep, nutrition, hydration, muscle management, all that sort of thing. However, it's often people are frustrated because they expect the results yesterday. But, you know, play the long game. Like, where are you going to be in a year's time? And, you know, most people will go, yeah. If you said, oh, could you ever run a marathon? Nah, probably couldn't. And then if you say, you know, I'll give you £1 million if you run a marathon in the next 12 months. I'll be like, oh yeah, definitely, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a different those different styles of motivation, and I think it's so important there that the fun element is so important. I think particularly with elements of training like this, where you know an Ironman potentially it's not a team sport and an endurance event, and you've done a lot of events solo, obviously, and long endurance events solo, and you've spoken there about the kind of quirky ways you've kept it fun by using a duck as a pacer, essentially, to get you through
basically.
it. One of the other pillars was community there in your plan. When you're pushing yourself to extremes, you know, of training in terms of Ironmans, or even if, as you say, it's someone getting up and doing a couch to 5K or whatever it is they're building into their life to get them moving and build that challenge in there. When it does sometimes become a bit depressing because maybe you aren't seeing the progress as quickly as you want to, and we all live in a world of instant gratification now where people want everything at the touch of a button, and as you say, you've got to think macro rather than micro. How important is it to build a community around you of people that are going to uplift you, particularly when you're training for something or doing something as extreme as what you've gone and done?
Yeah, so the community, there's 3 categories within the community pillar. The first category is your friends and family. So these are people quite close to you who you see regularly in face to face, or maybe you might only see them on Facebook, like aunts and uncles and that sort of thing. But that's your tier 1. There's pros and cons to all of them, by the way. So the pros are they've got your best interest at heart, they're going to be super supportive, and they're great. The downside is sometimes your closest friends and family can sort of dissuade you from doing the hard thing to protect you from failure. So that's real. That does happen. Like, are you sure you want to do that? You might get injured. You know, what if you don't make it? Blah, blah. That's totally normal. They're not doing it out of spite or jealousy. They're just protecting you from failure, which, please, if anyone's listening, don't be that guy or girl. Like, it's just let them fail. Please let them fail. They'll learn so much more about themselves instead of like not doing it because they might fail. Then your second tier is what I call your crew. So these are like actual people you might actually pay for their services. So that could be a physiotherapist, it could be a nutritionist, it could be a coach, mentor, joining a club, a triathlon club, a running club. Like, so these are like people that actually giving you advice for you to improve their services. So I coach people for Ironman. I'm part of their crew now. And it could also be physical crew come and help you on the day. So if you're running a 100-miler, you might need someone to bring you food or drive you there or whatever, right? So that's your crew. And then the third one's your online community. You know, pros and cons with crew, because we're going to touch on that. The pros are, you know, they really invested in helping you, which is great. The cons are you've really got to appreciate, even though you're paying them, because some people, you know, you're like, oh, well, I'm paying you, you should do the thing. You still got to appreciate them. So it's really important, because crewing is hard, by the way. I don't know if you've ever crewed someone doing a long, hard thing. It's almost harder than doing the thing, because you don't have the adrenaline that they have. You know, you're not eating as well, really. You're in a car potentially, or you're sitting in a car park in the freezing rain waiting for them to come. It's a hard job. So if you're doing a hard, long challenge, anyone who's crewing you, which also could be your friends and family, by the way, so they can overlap, just appreciate them, smile, make it fun for them, and that sort of thing, right? Okay, so that's pros and cons. Because if you don't, you get a thing called crew rebellion, where the crew suddenly go, well, actually, if it wasn't for me, you couldn't achieve this thing, because I've got all your food in my car. So yeah, really appreciate them. And then the third one is online community. I really, and I'm quite passionate about this, believe and have experienced that 99 99.9% of your online community is supportive. Find the right crowd, find your team, join Strava, join online Facebook groups of people who are doing the same thing as you, and you'll find it's awesome. It's super inspiring seeing what other people are getting up to. And just know that the 0.1% of people who give you a bit of grief online are mostly just jealous, so feel sorry for them. Like that's how I go into, and not that I get much grief, to be fair. Mostly it's just about my dodgy haircut or something. There's again pros and cons of your online community. But finding your tribe, super important. But then everyone's individual. So for example, I have my tribe, the Ironman tribe, and but I still prefer to train alone. I still like to train alone. So although I've got those people who I can chat to and have banter with and support, and when they're doing stuff I see on Strava, I'm super pumped for them, and I get the same back. I enjoy that, but I still like to do stuff on my own, and that's just personal preference for me. So just find what you like to do and what works for you, and there's always going to be like-minded people out there who are in the same boat as you, 100%.
Definitely, just go looking for it. It's a great phrase, find your tribe, because sometimes whether you're interacting with them, face to face, and you go out and go on rides together or run together, but equally as you say there, if you prefer to train alone, just seeing them pop up on Strava or whatever, it is inspiring. And I think what's really interesting about what you said there is around the crew element as well. And just when I did my first London Marathon, a lot of my mates came up to watch, and I finished, and I had no idea what I was doing. I got through it, but I bullied my way through it rather than really cruised it. And one of my closest mates, asked me how I was, and I was like, "Oh, I'm pretty tired." And he said, I've walked 12 miles today. I'm tired too." I'm there, hanging out.
And he didn't train for that, did he? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, he didn't get handed out sweets and stuff on the way. So I completely appreciate you. Look after your crew, definitely, because I've got my arm around him and say, thanks so much. And what I'd really love to understand there as well within the way you approach life, because you spoke about the kind of purpose and drive for going and doing the 105 Ironmans in 105 days was around getting that final record of the endurance records. But then equally you speak there about keeping it fun and keeping it enjoyable, and you prefer to train alone sometimes, and a lot of it's obviously self-motivated. I'd love to know what your metric or metrics for success are when you're taking on these challenges. Is it primarily to go and get the record? Is it to enjoy the journey, and if you get the record, that's an added bonus? Or is it kind of a mixture of the two? How do you define success when you're taking on these challenges for yourself?
Yeah, for me, it's entirely getting that record. Yeah, there's zero success if I don't break the record. It's an unpopular opinion, but I'm not really in it for the journey. You ask Mo Farah if he enjoys running a marathon, he's almost certainly no. Like, he'll only enjoy it if he crosses that finish line and wins. Okay, well, marathon's a bad example for Mo, but you get my point. Usain Bolt's not going halfway down the 100-meter track going like, "I'm loving this journey, man." He's like, "No, I want to cross that finish line." So I'm the same. No, I'm the terrier in me wants to chase the ball, and nothing matters until I've caught the ball, and that just works for me. That works for my personality. I need that really difficult thing to chase. I think we all need to have something difficult to chase. I think the positive feedback loop you get from achieving the difficult thing becomes, it spreads across the rest of your life. Find something that's really, really outside of what you think you can achieve, and then put all the systems in place to achieve that, have a realistic time frame and a timeline, and then just go out and do the hard thing. And then you'll get that positive feedback loop, and it'll be like, "Oh, well, this can extend to other areas of my life," and then you push the bar up, and I always say that if you're just like a bit like meh in life, there's 3 things you need to do that will drastically increase your life. Because if you go online and say, "Oh, like, how do I lead a better life?" It's so complicated. You got to do like 11 minutes of ice bath and 13 minutes of breath work and grounding and get sunshine in your eyeballs and sleep on a 12-degree mattress that costs £4,000. And like, man, it's too much, right? You can get 80% of the way. Look, all that stuff works, by the way. Like the grounding, I do that. I do the grounding, the ice, the sauna. I have a sauna and ice bath here at home. I do it every night. Like all that works. But you can get a lot of the way there with three things. Eat better. We all know what that looks like. Trust me. There's everything you put in your mouth, really, is whether it's good or bad for you. For the most part, I think most people do. If you don't, go and do some research. Get fitter. Again, we pretty much all know what that looks like. Do some exercise, get on your feet, get your heart rate up for as long as you can in a day, and spend more time outside in natural light, moving through the world. So you've got to physically get the world passing your eyeball. To do that, just sign up for something difficult. Just sign up for a marathon or an ultra or an Ironman. You will do all three. You will eat healthier because you have to. You will get fitter, and you will spend more time outside. So yeah, I'm a big fan of having just some physically difficult challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I'm the same where I think for me, I've always been quite goal orientated as I approach life. I think, as I said at the beginning, created the podcast to as a resource of what I would have loved to have heard 10 15 years ago of people that have done similar things, of definitely not 105 Ironmans, but in terms of building a life around goals and around purpose to go and chase. And what I found sometimes was, it would sometimes, when I was younger and probably less mature in my own mindset and also less sure of myself as an individual, that the big goals that I would set myself would sometimes feel like they were sort of suppressing me because I wasn't reaching the heights that I wanted to go and hit. And you mentioned earlier about how you knew for the 105 challenge, particularly, that you needed a few more years of experience, probably more from the training side of things. But I'd love to dive into how you keep yourself motivated and mentally well when you're chasing big goals, because just from personal experience, I've always found that there's that balancing act. Maybe speaking to what we spoke about earlier about being on the edge of pushing it too far one way or the other way. I'd love to know how you stay healthy with a relationship that you have with yourself when you're chasing these huge goals.
I find that bit quite easy, to be fair. I'm quite practical. For the 105, there were specific numbers you need to get at. I needed to be a certain speed. I needed to get a certain pace. I needed to be able to do that speed and pace at a lower heart rate. I needed to know exactly what I needed to fuel down to the 10 or 100 calories a day, within a 100 calorie margin. I needed to know how to keep that level of recovery every night. So I needed to work out how to maximize recovery in a short period of time every day. Technique, maybe, working on a slightly better run technique, for example. Yeah, so I was quite practical in the sort of the understanding. And this came with experience, of course. I knew right, okay, well, I can get there, but I'm not there now. Like, for example, there's no way I could run 100 miles tomorrow. It's just physically not possible. I will get injured. That's just a biological fact for me now. I haven't done a lot of running that sort of distance in years. Doesn't mean I can't. Now, for me, as a practical, if you said, Sean, sign up for a 100 miler, there's probably no way I'm even signing up for one this year. I'm probably signing up for one next September. And then I'm probably putting a 50 miler in this year sometime. And then really working on my foundation, my injury, and that sort of thing. And that's just because I know where I am now. I'm still nursing a couple of injuries from Iron 105. I'm probably 3-4 kgs heavier than I need to be to run well for longer. So I know all this stuff, so I'm just going to play that long game. And I think, I'm in a slightly advantageous place because I have the experience of knowing where I am and knowing my progression of fitness. But I think nowadays with people, there's so many people out there you could ask for advice from that should be an easy equation for most people to work out. But some people just get fitter quicker. some people sleep better. They just do. Some people naturally have a better diet. And they will increase that rate of fitness. So, there are people out there who now in, end of March, beginning of April, could, with not, maybe they can do a marathon. Maybe they could get up to 100 miles by the end of the year. So they would have to be, really put in a lot of work, make sure they nail all the 10.5 pillars, and it is achievable. So, yeah, I don't really get down by my performance not being where it is. I do get down by injury, though. I am still only human, so that frustrates me because I'm like, oh man, now this is going to delay stuff. But again, like if I can't change it, I can't change it. Like I'm not going to, if I have to postpone because I don't want to risk severe injury, then it's just part of life. And then I'm like, okay, well now I get to train a little bit longer, which I love training, by the way. So I'm like, oh, this is actually for me a bonus. 6 months more of training, brilliant. Let's go.
Love it.
So yeah, I never really get down by kind of that weight of like progress. I'm like, oh, I gotta. If anything, I get excited because I set realistic goals because I really want to play the long game. There is nothing in me that makes running 100 miles this summer and totally ruining myself, potentially for life, by the way. Like you can pick up certain injuries running 100 miles that if you're not careful about, that's you, maybe not for life, but potentially for a very, very long time, you're out if you're not careful. There's no point. I see no reward in that hero's kind of like, however, if I've trained for 5 years and this is my big moment, then there's certain, like it's going to hurt anyway. Running 100 miles hurts everyone, hurts the pros.
Yeah.
So you just gotta weigh that up. So yeah, I'm quite happy to have these long goals because, again, me running 100 miles is not like that's all part of this big long goal of me still being able to do long hard stuff into my 60s and 70s. So
yeah,
I'm very good at playing the very long game.
Yeah, which I think is such valuable advice. Again, like we said, because I think people expect things to happen quicker than they potentially.
Yeah, you should just have stuff to look forward to later in life. Like I'll go on my phone now, right? So I'm going on my phone, and I'm going to my calendar, and I'm going to years. Look here, so I've got in December 2034. So there's 2034 is the year. I'm going to go to December, and I'm going to go to the 8th of December, and it's in the diary already. Conway family row the Atlantic.
Love it.
That's what we're doing as a family of 4. Me, my 2 boys, and my wife. It's either that year or the following year. Or there's 2 sweet spots before my youngest will be old enough, and my oldest will still be around. He won't have gone off to wherever he's going, to AI school or whatever. So it's cool. I've got something to look forward to in 8 years' time or whatever.
That's brilliant.
And I think we should all have those long term. That baffles people. Like whenever I show someone my calendar for that 2034, they're like, "What are you like?" It makes no sense to them. For me, it makes total sense. It's like, why wouldn't you have something to look forward to in 10 years' time? Come on, you know.
That's that is fantastic advice because I've not got anything planned that far in advance, and I think
no one does. Literally, I don't think I've met anyone who has something in their diary for like more than a year away. Like, we've got to book our ski holiday for next year, otherwise we won't get the chalet. Like that's about as far in advance as people think nowadays.
Yeah, well, once we finish recording, you'll know one more person because I'm going to start thinking about doing exactly that because that is such great advice. You say, why would you not want something to look forward to? You say you plan your holidays a year in advance, but think macro, and that's one of the big key bits of advice that I've taken from this conversation is think on the long term scale. You said that you want to be doing these endurance events until you're in your 60s and your 70s, and think along those lines. It's such fantastic advice, and I can't wait to watch the whole journey go through as the Conway clan are heading off to the Atlantic, because that'll be an awesome adventure.
Yeah, I can't wait. Like the biggest dilemma, I was nearly going to. So I had 2 options. I was going to buy a boat now, rent it out from now till then, which will pay for the boat. And then I spoke to someone else who said, actually, no, boat technology is coming along so much. You probably want to wait, buy the boat when you do it, and then rent it out afterwards because you'll just have a better boat. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll see how that works out. But yeah, so no, it's the plans are in motion. It's great. I can't wait.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I had a couple of friends that did it. That rode it last year. They said it was obviously brutal, but just an awesome experience. So yeah, I wish you all the best with that. And this has been a conversation that's been full of advice and full of experience, and I can't thank you enough for it. And it's a great moment to just bring it to the kind of closing, quickish fire questions that we go with, and they're designed really to give the listeners three bits of tangible takeaway advice. But you've already given us so much, so it'll be three more bits of advice. And the first one is a book that you think should be on all of our bookshelves.
And that is a hard one. Iron 105, my own book. No, I'm kidding. Do you know a book I really, really enjoyed was Chris Froome's autobiography, because he grew up in Kenya, and he did the hustle, man. He had this big long dream of like one day being in the Tour de France. And I can assure you, I grew up in Africa as well. I was born in Zimbabwe. As a kid running around the bush barefooted in Zimbabwe, the concept of landing up in the Tour de France is so impossible for me as that kid. Like, it's just unthinkable. And Chris Froome did that. Like, it's a really good book of him hustling and going to races and sleeping in his car and all that stuff. And then somehow, eventually becomes Tour de France champion. So like, I mean, there's many books I like, but his I remember, and maybe I resonate with it more because I'm also an African kid. But yeah, I enjoyed that book.
Awesome, that'll definitely go. I love those kind of sporting autobiographies. So yeah, that will go on my list for sure. And the second one is a time in your journey where failing then led to success.
Well, the biggest one is I failed as a photographer, so that became mega fuel for the fire because it kind of made me realize how not to do stuff. But I've failed a lot, man. I failed my first attempt at the 105 Iron 105. I failed at my first attempt cycling across Europe. I failed at my first attempt running the length of Britain. I failed at my round the world cycle record because it wasn't my fault. That one I got run over. Well, none of them my fault. Injury's injury, right? But yeah, so I think all the failures been fuel for the fire. I'm very good at not dwelling on the past too much. And I guess if I had a superpower, it'd be that. No, failure's good. I call it hiccups. It's just a hiccup. Yeah, well, learn from it, crack on.
It's a great superpower you've got there to not dwell on the past. It's one that personally, that's a lot of work I'm doing, is trying not to beat myself up for things that didn't go right or things that I didn't do as well as I wanted to. So that for me is a fantastic.
Just learning, like you just learn. Like, look, you can't be negligent and go like, and then just make the same mistake again. So like, just work out. Write a list. Like, okay, that didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? What could I have done better? How can I improve that situation? And literally physically have a pen and paper, and it actually sort of gets you excited, and and also you feel a bit embarrassed by some of the things that you failed at because of I should have known better, and then it cements it in your mind.
Yeah, it's great advice, and yeah, I'll definitely be following suit on that. And the third is, I mean, you've had an amazing journey. We spoke a bit about where you were 15 years ago to now, and the incredible things you've done. The final question is, what piece of advice would you give to your 20-year-old self that you obviously know now, but you would have loved to have known, or looking back, could have really used when you were 20?
Yeah, don't be in a rush to make a success of whatever you want to do. You're likely going to change your mind on a lot of stuff anyway. Use your 20s to just be curious, explore, try lots of different things. Because, like, let's say I had become this world-renowned National Geographic photographer at the age of 25, which is what I thought I'd be, or certainly 30. You've still got another 40 years of doing that thing. So, like, why are you in a rush to get there by 25 or 30? Like, just be curious, go and do lots of different things. And I wish I'd just had the foresight to play that long game and then not lower my ambition. So just don't lower your ambition to increase your chance of success. I think it's impossible or unrealistic to expect 100% of whatever you do to be fun and enjoyable and motivating and inspiring. So what I should have done as a photographer is I should have gone, right, well, okay, there's this bit of photography called school portrait photography that I really dislike. I don't enjoy it. However, it's regular and it's sustainable and it puts food on my table. how many of those do I need to do to cover all my bases? Like, it's sort of like having a part-time secure job. Like, I'm a big fan of that. Do the part-time secure job, which means you got all your bills to pay, rent, food, council, whatever, right? Then, and work out how much of your week that's going to take up. For me, it would have been probably 2 days a week. I genuinely could have survived on photographing one school a week and doing the admin on the second day, which would have led me the rest of the week to actually follow my passion. And that's what I should have done. We all need to put food on the table and shelter and warmth and all that. But we don't need as much that we think we do, and the rest of the time then start being curious and trying lots of different things. And I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd sort of kind of had the courage to go like, but it was hard because the schools paid so well. When that carrot got dangled in front of me, I was like, oh well, I could go and photograph another school today and probably earn $1,000, or I could photograph this magazine gig for 50 quid. Like, it was that big of a difference, unfortunately. Yeah, right. But I should have just been strong enough to say no to the money and chase the dream, because then I could have been the Jimmy Chin, gone off and suddenly gone into film and video and become this amazing producer, director, filmographer, which I genuinely think is where I would have landed up being had I just played that long game,
Yeah. But it didn't work out. It worked out okay in the end, though.
Well, yeah, totally. It became fuel for the fire, yeah, man.
Yeah,
so I can't regret it too much.
No, not at all. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's bouncing back from failure, and there's bouncing back in the way that you've done, which is just, for me, inspiring. I've followed your journey for a long time, and obviously engaged with all of your stuff on socials, website, etc. And I'm sure that everyone listening to this will have been inspired equally. If they didn't already know you, they definitely will now. And if they are and have been inspired, where can they go to learn more about Sean, the coaching, Ironman, the books, etc.? Where can we go to follow your journey?
Yeah, SeanConway.com. Yeah, my website has pretty much everything, and then I'm on all the socials. Just search me. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Brilliant. Well, I encourage everyone to do so. And the only thing that remains for me to do now is just say a huge thank you, Sean, for your time, your energy, your expertise, and for joining me on the podcast. It's been a fantastic conversation.
No worries, Tom. Yeah, thanks for having me, mate.
No, the pleasure is all mine. Cheers, mate. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.